Good morning and welcome to the video on book critiques. And you were given the packet in class the other day, but it is also posted on Sycamore. So if you've lost it, if you didn't get it or weren't in class, it is posted up there. So I'm going to talk briefly about that, and this will be our last writing assignment of the year. You will be making the outlines this week, and then you'll be writing the first of next week. And it will just be rough draft, but I want you to know how to do a critique. And so while this is a book critique, it can also be applied to other things. A critique of research, a movie critique, a critique of a restaurant. So it can actually apply in a lot of different ways. So I'm going to work with you to take you through that packet and explain how book critiques are done. And your main job is to be thinking about what book you want to critique. So let's get started. If you look at the front page of that packet, it explains the 5 different paragraphs that you will be writing. Now, certainly if you were doing a longer scientific critique or a longer book, you could add paragraphs to this. So you could do two paragraphs for each of those topics, or 6 body paragraphs. But you begin with an introduction, and the introduction for a book critique is a little bit different than an introduction that you might do for something else. You do want to use an attention getter, so you could use a question. You could give a very quick something that happens in the story. For example, in Tom Sawyer, there is a situation where Becky and Tom are trapped in a cave. So you may want to have a question. Have you ever been trapped in a cave or a room and didn't think that you could get out? That would be a great way to start a paragraph about Tom Sawyer. So find the reader's interest in this. The second thing that you want to do is you could add some quotes. You could tell just briefly what the story is about. So if you were doing Tom Sawyer, you could say something like, if you love the shenanigans of middle school boys and find great humor in that, then Tom Sawyer, it would be the book for you. But then another thing that's really important to do in the introduction paragraph is to tell what the title is, who it's by, when it was published, and who published it. And you want to make sure that you give information even about why it was published. So Mark Twain publishing Tom Sawyer, he is showing the life of those living along the river in the 1800s. He was great at comedy, so he's providing some comic relief for this time. So you can add those kinds of things into your introduction paragraph. But you want to set the stage with all of the technical information in the beginning. Then you're going to move to the body paragraphs, but they're not going to be the same as the body paragraphs that you've done for a research paper or on a person or on a place. Instead, they're going to progress through the story. So let's take a look at that. In your first body paragraph, you're going to tell me about the characters and the setting. Describe the story. Tell me the time and place that it's occurring. So in fiction or nonfiction, hopefully you'll have an idea of the time and place. The story I'm going to model for you doesn't necessarily have a fixed time and place, but we'll get to that in just a second. You want to introduce the primary characters. Do not introduce every single character that's in the book. You mainly want to pick 3 or maybe 4 characters that you can talk about and you want to tell me a little bit about them. Describe them to me. In Tom Sawyer, you want to tell me that Tom is an incorrigible boy full of shenanigans, and you can even give me a description of him physically. What is in your mind as you read Tom Sawyer? He's probably a boy with dirty clothes, grass-stained pants, his hair is all out of place, and who knows what he has in his pockets. So you want to tell me as much about him as you can. Whereas on the other hand, Becky is a sweet, young, innocent girl, and Tom falls in love with her. So give me as much information as you can. You also want to include the setting. Tell me where this is. This is along the Mississippi River on hot and humid days. So you want to include everything. I want to feel like I'm being taken into the midst of the story. And I want you to use critique vocabulary, and I'm going to show you some of that at the end. So here is an example of the first body paragraph, or the points that you want to include in it. And then I'm going to show you my outline for the paragraph that I have done. So you want to use this to tell the primary characters, which I just told you, describe the primary scenes. There could be multiples, and in the story that I chose, there are 2 scenes, so I'll show you what to do with that. And you want to give a brief summary of the story. Don't tell me the whole story in the first paragraph, in the first body paragraph. You want to just, briefly tell me that Tom Sawyer is a story about some pre-teenagers who find their way into all kinds of shenanigans. And then you go into the second paragraph and you build the plot. So take a look at my outline. I have decided to do How the Grinch Stole Christmas. I figured that was a story that everybody had read. So I start by giving the first half of this is the characters. So I talk about the Grinch, ugly, unhappy monster. Now you could go further into the description, that with a teeny tiny heart, he's kind of overweight and old. You can do whatever you want with that. I also highlight his dog. Grinch's dog was a cute little dog, kind of a slave though to Grinch. And then I move into the Whoville characters. Their families, they have lots of love, they're all happy, whatever you want to do there. Now I move to the settings. So I go back to Grinch's, and I could do Grinch and then where he lives as number 2. However you outline them is okay. But Grinch's cave is ugly and dark and cold. So I want to communicate that to those that are reading this. And you could include colors, gray and mildewy, anything that you want to communicate to let me know where he lives. And then you want to describe Whoville to me. It's snowy, it's Christmas Eve. Families are warm in their homes, there's yummy food, and we know that the Grinch is jealous and he wants to eliminate Christmas. So there is where we find out the main storyline of the book. And he wants to make the Who's unhappy. And so on those last 2 points, I can actually point out this is what the book is about, and then move into it. Now, I may have already done some of that in the introduction, but you can also highlight a few things in this first body paragraph. All right, in the second body paragraph, you want to use this to go into the main themes and storylines. Tell me what is happening in the story. This is your chance to summarize, and I mean summarize 1 paragraph, maybe 2. You do not want to retell the whole story to me because you want me to read it. So only tell like a section, but don't give me all the details. As you describe it, you want to build toward the climax or the cliffhanger of the story. And then finally, you can share how the story resolves in this paragraph, or you can actually go cliffhanger for second paragraph and share that in the third paragraph, how it's resolved. Now, it's kind of hard to not summarize the whole story for you when doing the Grinch. However, if you think about the Tom Sawyer book, you're not going to tell every single thing that happens. You're not going to tell me that he attends his own funeral. You're not going to tell me about his shenanigans with Huck Finn. You're not going to tell me maybe all of the stuff that he does in the beginning of the book. However, you might pick one thing, like the time in the cave, and you could tell me that particular story. So you would say something like, while the whole book was tremendous, one particular part of the book drew my attention or held my attention. Becky and Tom were exploring the caves, and then you would tell me that story and tell me how it's resolved. But don't tell me about the whole book. All right, so here's my body paragraph 2. I do talk about how the Grinch builds a sled dog and his sled, and the dog is going to lead that. He rides to Whoville, invades Whoville on Christmas Eve, steals their food, their gifts, their trees, their decorations. He loads the sled to return to the cave. And when the Whos awake, he expects them to be so sad, and he listens to hear disappointment. But what does he hear? That's by cliffhanger. What does he hear? Now, this is kind of the whole story, but I didn't highlight everything. I didn't highlight even that he took the crumbs for the rats. I didn't highlight that a little girl saw him and thought he was Santa Claus. So those are things that I didn't put within the book or within the critique. Just this incident. So then I'm going to move to my third paragraph. And here you're going to tell how the story was resolved, or how the incident that you shared was resolved, and how the characters interact at the end. You want to point out how the characters have grown and if they learned something during the story. And you want to share any morals to the story that the author may be passing along. So here is my Grinch. The Whos are singing. They're happy. The Grinch is confused. Why are they happy? He realizes the Christmas is in the heart, and he returns to Whoville and gives everything back. The Whos forgive him. He enjoys Christmas with the Whos and becomes a changed Grinch, whose heart grows however many times the size. So that's where I might talk about the moral of the story being, that people are different. The Whos seem to be a little different than the Grinch, but they accept him anyway. Whatever morals to the story, you can include those. All right, then finally you will have a conclusion paragraph, and this is where you can state your opinion. Try not to use my first person, but you can say things like, this book was extremely sad, or this book was extremely scary and frightening. The author did an excellent job in developing the characters in The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. The Grinch goes from being a hateful old man to loving the Whos. Now, I'm not saying I liked this book and I liked those characters. I'm staying away from third person. How did the plot affect you? For anyone who's read The Grinch, the plot should affect us, that we want to give and we want to share and all of that. Was the author's style of writing interesting? Was there a worthwhile lesson? So those are all things that you can answer in the conclusion. You may use first person once or twice. You could say something like, I highly recommend this book, but try to stay away from first person most of the time. All right, then in the next few slides, I have broken a document into some shorter slides. This will be all one document on Sycamore, but it's helpful critique language for you. So here is the beginning. Here are some phrases, words that I should see. Of course, the book was written by, you might want to use nonfiction, this nonfiction book, action-packed tale, a thrilling tale. This is a mystery, horror, fantasy, historical book, fast, funny, and really satisfying story, thriller. So have these in front of you, and I want to see some of that language in your body paragraphs. Then in paragraphs 2 and 3, these are some things that you can use, especially when you get down to the third body paragraph and the conclusion. You can use things like this: each chapter is more exciting than the last, my favorite part, another bit I really enjoyed. But these are, I think this first one is much better with the vocabulary than this one. But then here are some examples, and there's 2 slides for this one because there's so many, but there are some great phrases here. The text is supported by dramatic illustrations. The witty illustrations capture the conflict. This book is quite funny, but most of all freaky, sad, and exciting. So there's a lot of examples. I'd love to see some of them. Here's another page. Again, I said all of this will be condensed into one document on Sycamore, so you can download it and keep it with your critique information. So your first job is to pick a book. You can pick any book that you have read this year. You can pick one of the ones you read in school. You can pick a book that you've read at home, something, fiction or nonfiction. Either one is fine. And you will be developing your outline for this over the next couple of days. We will talk about it more on Wednesday, and then next week you're going to do a quick writing of this. So it really is kind of a condensed. Normally I would spread this into 3 weeks, but it's condensed just because we're at the end of school. So you'll turn this in on the last Wednesday that we have, and then I will be, giving a little bit of feedback, and I'll get it back to you. So hopefully that has explained what critiques are and how they work, and I hope that you enjoy thinking through some of the literature that you've read and offering me some opinions perhaps of things I should include on my summer reading list. So that's it. Enjoy writing.